Welcome to this Science Business webinar on how real-time data will reshape our cities. The event is curated by our Data Rules Group, our Data Rules Steering Group, which brings together experts from major companies, leading academic institutions, and international fora such as the OECD. So I'm David Pringle. I'm the moderator for today's webinar. I'm also going to be a rapporteur. We are going to write, as Science Business, we are going to write an article highlighting some of the key takeaways from the event. So look out for that on our website. I should say the webinar is being recorded, so it's very much on the record. Now, I'll just quickly introduce our speakers before getting into how the webinar will work and the subject matter. So today we have a great lineup. We have Aerts, she's the head of the Novartis Foundation. We have Dusan Chrenek, he's the principal advisor, DG CLIMA at the European Commission. We have Maarten Sukel, he's the artificial intelligence lead at the city of Amsterdam. Daniel Serra, he's the director of the Innovation Hub South at EIT Urban Mobility. I'm also particularly delighted to say we have Francois William Croteau. He's a member of the executive committee at the city of Montreal, so joining us from Canada, one day after the Canadian Thanksgiving, so particularly pleased he was able to join us. And we also have Marcel van Oosterhout. He's the associate executive director at the Erasmus Center for Data Analytics at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. So Marcel, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry to say, unfortunately, Professor Amal El Falah Segricini from the Sorbonne University, she's had to cancel this morning. So we haven't had an opportunity to replace her, but we still have a very good high quality lineup of speakers. So the aim of this webinar is to capture and share best practice about how AI and data analytics are being used to improve urban living, which is a particularly pertinent topic right now, obviously, because cities across the world are, let's say, being disrupted in many ways by both the pandemic and the economic fallout from that pandemic and the change in working practices. So there's a lot going on in an urban context right now, and potentially we can use data analytics and artificial intelligence to help us address some of those issues and some of those challenges that are coming up and potentially build better, more livable cities. We're also going to look at how some of these techniques can inform the wider green agenda, particularly in the EU with the Green Deal, and how the use of AI and data analytics can help in that respect. So the webinar is going to be divided into 3 segments, and we're going to have some lead speakers in each of those segments, but I'm going to invite the other speakers to come in and comment as appropriate. And we're also going to have some time for audience Q&A in each of those segments. Now, if you like, for those of you who are actually active participants in the webinar, if you would like to contribute, the way we're going to do this is if you could actually turn on your video and actually physically raise your hand, or you can use the virtual raise hand function as well, and we'll look out for those interventions. There's a group of you also who are acting as observers, but you still have an opportunity to ask questions via the Q&A function, so you can enter questions in that way. But if you're actually actively involved as a participant, you can turn on your video. I'll look for that and then look for your question. So I'd like to get straight into the first topic, which is essentially using AI and data analytics to improve urban transport and encourage active lifestyles. I'm going to start by asking Daniel from EIT Urban Mobility to set the scene for us a little bit, because I know they've been looking at this topic in a lot of depth and really understand the opportunity. So Daniel, you can start by just laying out, what the potential is here around using AI and data to improve the way we get around cities. We'll start with that, and then we'll get a little bit into how we can encourage healthy and active lifestyles. So Daniel, the floor is yours.
Hi, David. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to start today with you. I think in EIT Mobility, we are a very young organization. Yes, we are trying to innovate in the field of urban mobility. And obviously, one of the first issues that we found is that we have a lack of data. Okay, I think it's one of the main issues that we are facing in the mobility. I think right now the data, it's normally owned by the private companies. We have these wallet gardens that exist today with some private companies. I think we can have the case of Google. This is one of the most known owners of and providers of data. And on the other hand, we have many of the public administration cities that are providing data. Sometimes there's not so much trust on the data that they are providing, and because the way that they are producing this data, it was not created to just to share with others. That's very important. And at the end, the main issues that we see that there's lack of collaboration between private and public partnership. That's the main issue that we are facing today. And we see that one of the highest, things that will come in the urban mobility is the mobility as a service. That is when you can move from A to B with an app and pay with your mobile phone and access to many mobility services. For that, we need to create new governance models, okay? And also we need to create governance models when public and private administration could share the data, okay? And I think this is very important today. And I think in the next step, I think we need to, if we want to develop, artificial intelligence, services, tools, products, I think we need to have enormous amount of data. That's very important. And for that reason, we are still in an early phase. I think when we need to get agreements, we need to work on the data. Obviously, we need to keep the privacy. I think in Europe, we are working well on the terms of privacy, but at the end, it is to create new grounds where we can share data between the public and private stakeholders.
Okay, so you've identified some challenges up front there for us, which we'll talk about how potentially we can address those, and what cities are actually doing to address those today. We'll come back to that. But thank you for that, Daniel. I'm going to turn to Anne now, actually, because it's a very related challenge for cities as to how to encourage people to be more active in an urban environment and how potentially we can help. Well, we can use data in that respect. So, Anne, I'm just going to get you to lay out that opportunity first.
Thank you, David. And I think in the health sector, we realized very fast that to improve the health of a population in an urban setting, you cannot just make the health care system work better. You have to act upon all the underlying determinants that influence the health of a person, being that healthy food or more physical exercise or all the things we know about, no smoking and all of that. So to address that in low and middle income settings, what we did specifically was to bring together partners from the different sectors, not only from the health sector, but also partners from the sports sector, from the food and agriculture sector, from urban planners, from the education sector and the digital sector. And we looked at how can we improve the health as a total in this city. And we rolled that initiative out, which is called Better Hearts, Better Cities, because we focused on the overall goal that we aligned with our partners for cardiovascular health, the first and leading cause of death around the world. We rolled that out in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Dakar, Senegal, and in Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. And there we started collecting the data on both on the progress of that initiative that brought together all these different sectors, and on the health outcomes, because the overall goal was a health goal. So we mainly measured the health outcomes. And in fact, that was the first time, as Daniel rightly said, you have a lack of data in many settings. And this was also the first time for all of these authorities in the cities to get access to real-time data and be able to use real-world, real-time data for their decision-making, because we use those data and redesign the interventions where needed, or also to target community campaigns on health education or better physical exercise, all of these elements to the areas where it was most needed. Now, that was absolutely a mindset shift already in the way of working of those authorities with whom we partner. But they love it, and they are in the driver's seat of now using these data for further decision making. The beauty of all of this now, bringing together these 3-4 cities where we have rolled out that Better Hearts, Better Cities initiative, is that all the health data we collected not only showed us that it worked, we improved the control for blood pressure, for example, massively, so that we could reduce the number of people doing a stroke by 20% in less than 2 years' time. So it's really massively effective. But we also bundle now those data together with many other data from cardiovascular health sources in the first global data collaborative that we just launched for cardiovascular population health, together with Microsoft and Apollo hospitals in India as the first partners. We bundle data from millions of people to now use that to develop AI-driven tools for policymakers, for the decision makers in the urban settings, and understand where their high-risk people are living in the cities. What kind of communities need to be addressed with different interventions? What kind of communities need a higher level of resources than others? So it is enabling policymakers and decision makers on the ground to use that real-time data now to transform, if you may, or to redesign their health systems from being reactive systems, what they currently are, treating a disease when it occurs, to become proactive, even predictive, and ultimately, hopefully preventive, so that it becomes a real health system and keeps the populations healthy. So that is the goal of this whole undertaking, and definitely this kind of new partnerships of data sharing between different organizations is absolutely key if we want to improve population health at a large scale.
Yeah, I think Daniel alluded to some of the same issues there around getting different stakeholders to work together and share data. So let's come back to that theme in a moment. But let's first hear from Francois about actually what's happening in Montreal in terms of urban mobility. I mean, I understand you're actually trialing some projects on the ground right now. So tell us about your experience with that.
Thank you, David, for this invitation this morning. I'm very proud to talk about Montreal this morning. Of course, we have two big challenge in Montreal to use more data for planning the transportation or mobility in a large part of the city. First of all, we have mostly a lot of organizations who manage or plan the mobility in Montreal. So it's the governance is very complicated in Montreal. So Montreal City don't have all the power to plan all the mobility or transportation in the city, but we have to work a lot with as the data sharing to get a more better planification for that mobility. So what we're doing right now is just to focus on how we can collect more data to be sure that we can take better decisions. So we focus on the data-driven decision-making in Montreal. It's a new kind of culture for us. It's not quite implicated or just focused like this in the past. And the other thing is we're working on introducing AI system to plan a better mobility for public services, vehicles or transportation. So for example, what we're doing right now for public transit is to collect data of all the systems on the streets. If you can have some obstacles during the transport of some buses, we collect all the data. We can help us to plan better line or better transit for the other line. And on the other part, the transit organization in Montreal called STM just collect all the data of the user, and with the mix of that data, we can plan a better transit on the street. And of course, when we have to make some work on the street, we can plan the obstacle that's going to be occur for that kind of line. So for us, it's a better usage of data, and in time we can introduce some AI system to the planification in the long-term duty for the transport transit. And other way with the bicycle, we use some other data where the cyclists just give us voluntarily their data of where they're going in the city. And for us, it's very important because when we have to plan all the new bike line in the city, we want to know where they come from to and where they go by with their bike. And for us, it's a big city, of course, Montreal, and all the streets who can be affected with that new bike line. We have to know the data, what is going to happen with the car transit, with the bus transit, and all that data can help us to put on a better planification for all that mobility for the citizen. And at the end, we last 2 years we introduced now AI system for the public services vehicles as the firefighter trucks and the snow removal trucks. So as you know, Montreal has a lot of snow in winter. So for us, it's a big issue to be sure that we can do that work better in the future. Of course, reduce the time of the riding of the truck, and of course the GHGs of that kind of working on the city. For example, for the firefighter trucks, the AI system reduced for around 3 to 4 seconds the time of the journeys for the truck. So it's very important because in Montreal, the firefighters is also the first responder. So for us, 3 seconds is very important to save lives. So when we introduce AI in the planification of the transit of that truck, we can save lives. It's the same thing for the snow removal. When we analyze the GPS was on the truck and just put in an AI systems, all the data can help us to reduce the time of the snow removal in Montreal, and for the economy, for the better quality of life for the citizen. It's very helpful. And for us, it's just at the beginning of the using of the AI in Montreal with all the data we can collect for a better planification of the mobility in the city.
Yeah, thanks, Francois. No, that's very helpful. I just want to stay with you a moment, actually, and ask you about a point that Daniel raised, which is this question of actually getting the data from the private sector and some of the big internet platforms that have a lot of that data. So obviously in an urban mobility context, you've got the likes of Uber and Lyft and Google and Apple to a certain extent. Are you looking to get data from those companies? And if so, is that difficult to do? Francois?
What we're doing right now is to be sure that we have we collect all the data and put on the server of Montreal City. So we don't want to depend on the other big company. Of course, we want to get the data sovereignty in Montreal and be sure that all that data can be shared with all the partners. We have a website with an open data. All the organization can put their data there to be sure that we share all the data that we have on the territory of Montreal, and then more organizing better planification of the transit in Montreal. So of course, it's a big issue right now because a lot of organizations just offer that kind of transit in Montreal, and the data is not mixed or collect quietly, very organized right now in Montreal. So what we're doing with the big goal that we have is to put all that data in the same data hub, a big data hub of mobility, and to be sure that we can all share the data and more a better planning of the shows, and to be sure that we're not depending of the bigger company like Google who offer ways, and we don't want to be sure that privacy of the data is very, the privacy is secure for the citizen.
Got it. And if I could just come back to you on this, actually, is it easy to reconcile the objectives of the private sector and the public sector in the context of urban mobility and urban living? Because, I mean, clearly the private sector exists as a business and with commercial imperatives, etc. You mentioned you're working with Microsoft, for example. How easy is it to dovetail the private sector's objectives with those of the public sector?
Oh, it's absolutely essential to work together. I think if we want to have an impact on the health of the populations where we work and where we want to improve the systems that they can address all the challenges they face, we need to work together. But it's very important in this kind of setting that the authorities, the city authorities, remain in the driver's seat. And with that, I wanted to also stress that it's not only about the data. What we've seen in all of our work in the different countries is that and it's been part of the topic that we studied within the working group for AI in health with the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development that I chair. So there we just came out with a report on the roadmap towards maturity for AI in health. And that is a working group. The report is really a making of hundreds of experts in the field of AI in health and health in the broad sense, I mean. So there was both public and private sector all together. We did a full analysis of what is out there already in the world, as it's not only about the future, but AI is already having a tremendous impact in many countries. And then we distilled the learnings from these examples that were the most successful and most scaled already throughout the world to build that roadmap towards using AI in the health system and transforming your health system to become proactive and predictive. And that roadmap that has highlighted 6 domains that are equally important for a government to invest in if it wants to advance on the maturity towards integrating AI in its health system. And it's not only data, obviously they are super important, and infrastructure as well. You know, half of the world is still not connected, so that's another issue. But one of the main domains that also came out was the skills of the populations and the workforce, the health or the transport or the IT workforce in data science and AI. To be able to tap into the potential of AI, these skills have to be leveled up globally massively and very urgently. Otherwise, low and middle income settings may be lagging behind, and we really have to avoid that. Another domain besides the people skills and the data and infrastructure was obviously strong governance and regulatory systems, as we all know, not easy to do, definitely not in the field of AI, but very importantly were innovative partnerships. So these sharing of data between public and private sector is absolutely key if we want to get there, to have that impact we are looking for. And innovative business models as well. We are not getting there with the classic business models, and governments, if they don't have enough funding to really pay for all of the solutions that could help to address their priority needs, need to be open for innovative ways for to incentivize innovation, or innovative ways of monetizing data, for example. And lastly, if AI-driven solutions are not based on a real priority need of the country and are not built around the users who will make sure that it gets taken up with the necessary processes already identified upfront, it won't get to scale either. So all of these 6 domains were equally important. Just to relativize the importance of data a little bit in the discussion, I think the roadmap towards AI maturity in health is absolutely key for all sectors. And definitely if we want to look at how can we improve people's longevity in a healthy way.
Got it. Okay. No, thanks, Anne. I want to come back to Daniel now. Daniel, just on this topic of actually getting access to the data and how we ensure that the various stakeholders' agendas are aligned. Is there a need for some kind of regulatory intervention? Is there a need for governments to actually, particularly in this context of urban mobility, to somehow align, what the big internet platforms are doing with the agenda of cities and healthy living?
Yeah, I think right now they are regulating that. I think at the local level, the cities with the tenders they are doing with all these new mobility companies, they are regulating the use of data, because most of these companies in many cities, they need to share the data. The problem, I think it's, as I'm highlighted, is that they are not expert in data. They don't have the right people in the, from the public sector. They don't have the skills to use data and to use artificial intelligence, for example. And for that reason, the tenders that they are applying, sometimes they don't know what they will use, how they will use this data, okay? What is the final goal for this data, okay? okay? That in some cases, and I say, it should be just to offer to third parties, yes, you know, innovative companies that they can provide services, but also there was a lot of users internally for the administration. But I think they are already regulating. I think from the top level, from the European Union and from the government from the different countries, they need to take this challenge as an opportunity, because also the European Union is pushing for this public-private partnership in data, you know, where there should be platform in all the countries where all the mobility data should be available, okay? But we are still in an early stage, okay? We know that from 3 years ago that we said that this will come, but I think many of the countries have not been working on that direction. And I think it's that the moment to kick off and to just to push for this public-private partnership. But as Anna said, I think the private sector is really important, and I feel the environments that we create for this PPE should be aligned with some benefits for this company. You know, there should be some incentives for these companies to develop, you know, this platform and really to take care of this platform. Yeah.
So carrots as well as sticks in terms of the involvement of the private sector. Okay, I just want to quickly hear from Maarten on this topic before we move to the audience questions. We've got a couple of questions from the audience I want to bring in. But Maarten, you just building on what Daniel said, it is partly a question of having the right expertise at a city level to harness this data, I guess.
Yeah, no, I do agree. And I think that's why at the City of Amsterdam, they hired me and my whole team of specialists surrounding AI. And what we're actually trying to do is instead of being dependent from other data sources or companies, what we're doing is using AI to actually become the eyes of the city. So we do not control the digital world as cities, but we do control to a level the physical world. So we're really using AI to bridge the gap and collect data, for example, from traffic cameras. You have those all around the cities. We can see what cars are driving, where, what speed, etc. We can see if people are keeping their distance, if people are wearing their face masks, and we can act on that, nudge them to do differently. So both in mobility and health, I think it's really important to get going, and especially use the knowledge from the universities that are doing a lot of work surrounding AI and have them work on use cases that are relevant for cities, so they can actually make momentum there. And I think then it's important to share this open source, so like that the private sector can pick up all these technologies and expand them globally. I think that's really the way to go here.
Okay, so apply the open source ethos in this context. There's questions, as I say, from the audience. So I just want to deal with these, actually. There's one for you, Francois, actually, which actually builds on what Maarten was just saying. It's what kind of data are you looking to collect from Montreal's streets, and how? Are you using cameras, for example, RFID tags? You know, what kind of data are you collecting, and how are you getting that?
It's very a mix of data that we collect right now in Montreal streets, especially, of course, camera who analyze all the transit in every corner of the streets and every kind of mobility, and RFID, of course, and some sensor too to just analyze exactly what is the movement in the city. And for example, what kind of work can help us with that kind of data we're using on the street is for when we have to plan the infrastructure works and the infrastructure of mobility, we just mix all the data we collected. For example, when we put sensor on the sewer pipes and we plan to just work on that sewer pipes just to change it, or a big work of infrastructure, we just analyze and just get the opportunity to improve public transit on that street that we're working at. So that data is very important for us, and that's why we just put a lot of sensor and camera to analyze every part of the street and every part of the city, to be sure that when we're planning a new work or our infrastructure works, we get all the opportunities to improve the mobility in the city. So that's why we're using all that kind of technology to collect data, and just to be sure that all that data is using for the good for Montreal.
Yeah, and of course the cost of that technology and the connectivity is coming down all the time, so I guess becoming more viable. There's another question here, actually. Maybe this was one for Anne, and possibly Daniel will comment as well, but it builds on what we were talking about earlier. What are the incentives for transport companies to share their data? So again, this goes back to engaging the private sector, and you know, why would they want to share their data with cities and potentially, I guess, their competitors? Have you got thoughts on that, Anne, from a private sector perspective?
I mean, the final
Sorry,
goal.
Daniel.
Sorry, I think the final goal should be a social, incentive, because at the end we are trying to improve the mobility for the citizens. Okay, that means that we need to have all the data available. Okay, and who is providing this data in most of the cases? In the case of Google, users, citizens. Okay. Why this is property of Google, and we cannot share in the city to improve the mobility, and if we go down on that issue, I think we need to encourage in the cities we need to all the players that are developing services there, they need to share data. Okay. We have a good example of open data from the private and public that are working well, and for example, of all the GTFS data sets that were created for the public transport provided by Google, and this is working quite well. And at the end, it's improving the experience for the citizens, But we need to really encourage when I sit with the private and public stakeholders and we go for this discussion, both of them are claiming that why I need to share the data, but I think this should be pushed by the administration. I think this is when the regulation can help just to solve this issue, that is to regulate that all the companies that are providing services in the city should share data. Yeah,
it's part of the license conditions almost, I guess. Anne, sorry, just a quick, we need to move to the next segment actually, but Anne, just a quick comment from you on that, a private sector perspective. What kind of incentives should cities be looking to provide?
Well, I think if a private sector commits to partner with a public sector on a shared goal, there is also a shared measurement, because that's how you will evaluate whether you reach your goal. And then, of course, the data that comes out of that has to be open, has to be open source. All the assets it will deliver have to be open source, because they can be so useful for many other geographical settings. So I don't think the private sector would have a problem with that, as long as it's part of the whole undertaking, that you have a line behind the same goal, then it's really no problem.
Yeah, it's partly about defining the objectives very clearly up front, I guess. Okay, no, great. Well, sorry.
No, if I have time, I want to share one example. I don't know if we have time, or maybe we can do it later, but I have a good example.
Well, Daniel, let's come back to that actually, if you don't mind, because we're going to try and stay on the schedule with the segments, and then we'll have a chance to discuss some of these issues later because they are interlinked. And in fact, this second segment does build on the urban transport one, because it's around energy efficiency and reducing pollution, and obviously using data and AI in that context. So first of all, I want to hear from Dusan Chrenek from the European Commission, because they've set this framework with the EU Green Deal, which is going to look to harness big data analytics and AI and computer modeling, I guess, to further its objectives. So, Dusan, if you can just give us an update on how you're approaching that and how that might be applied in an urban context.
Thanks, David. I would like to address several issues that were already raised, because our goal is really to create enabling environment and put right incentives also to collect data, to use data, and new technologies like AI. So maybe briefly, I would mention activities of the European Commission on Green Deal and digital transformation. Also our programs and funding, how we can support initiatives in this area, and also briefly mention our cooperation with European Covenant of Mayors and Global Covenant of Mayors. So for the Commission, two main priorities are Green Deal and digital transformation. And we need to work on both priorities in synergy, because without digital transformation, we cannot achieve our main objective to become climate neutral by 2050. And Green Deal is a holistic and long-term approach really to work on not only on climate change, but also on biodiversity, circular economy, zero pollution, sustainable food production, and smart transport and clean energy. So, and everything is related also to cities. But it's not sufficient only to have strategies. Like in digital part, we have strategy, digital strategy, also European data strategy, and strategy on AI in order to create a better system. So we are trying to have European data spaces and also to use better data for Green Deal. For the funding, I would highlight that now to come out from the COVID-19 crisis, the EU is going to have unprecedented budget that is going to be used also for Green Deal and digital technologies. So altogether, for the next years, 10 years, we will have more than 1,800 billion euros. That is one part, it's standard budget, but there is an additional budget for next generation EU, 750 billion euros. And this specific budget should be used 37% for Green Deal investment and 20% for digital investment. And this is really a huge possibility also for cities to profit from this investment. From standard budget, I would mention 3 programs. One is Digital Europe program, in order really to boost connection, high power computing, but also data management. There will be support for European data spaces, including Green Deal data space, but there is a data space on health, on transport, on energy, really to collect better data, more data, also standards, and use it more efficiently. But we will have in Digital Europe also project on digital twin of Earth, including projects on digital cities, digital twins of cities. There are already some good initiatives, exactly Rotterdam and Gothenburg, and we would like to support cities to have these digital twins to better model their situation and to help them to find new solutions, smart solutions on city level. Another program, Horizon Europe, has a specific mission on smart and climate neutral cities. And also they will provide digital platform and digital support. And our objective is to have 10 climate neutral cities in Europe by 2030. And cities for climate, they are extremely important. They are centers of knowledge, innovation, and also new technologies. And they can use faster, better new technologies in practice. I will mention also space program, that is support for Copernicus, that is the largest Earth observation system in the world. And this Copernicus is producing a huge amount of data that is not always fully used, but also it's important. There are climate services for cities, and it's extremely useful, but we need to use data much better. And this is a general issue with data. We have already huge amount of data, but not always used. So finally, for Covenant of Mayors, there is also global covenant of mayors that includes more than 10,000 cities globally, majority of them from Europe. And we are supporting them. There is one specific initiative on data for cities to help cities measure their emissions, but also to provide better analytical tools and support them in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. And I think there is also a good example that also huge companies could assist. Google is providing environmental data explorer to find out for cities their carbon footprint and also to provide them analysis. So it's possible to work also with huge companies, and actually in this fight against climate change and for a better planet, we need everybody. We need all that are in the technology sector. I think it's a good example that they can profit from the whole change, but also they can support strongly that we will live on our planet well, but within planetary boundaries, that we will not destroy our planet.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Dusan. So that's the big picture. There's the political will and sounds like the funding as well there to support this kind of shift. But let's hear from Marcel now. We'll drill down on some of those issues in a minute. But Marcel has actually done a big study looking at to what extent cities are actually using data today. So I think he has a really up-to-date picture of what's actually happening on the ground. So Marcel, let's hear about what your study's actually shown to date.
Thank you, David. I will share my screen with a couple of slides to illustrate the findings of this study. So this is a study which was done as part of an EU-funded lighthouse project, Ruggedized. And we did a survey among over 85 cities in Europe. And we looked at the stage of development of data, but specifically urban data platforms. Urban data platforms will be, let's say, key city infrastructure where different types of data from different silos are brought together, which actually creates the basis for new innovations to take off. So we talked about the opportunities of AI, but first you have to organize your data as a city. And what you see here is the cities that participated in that study, and we looked where they are in terms of the development of these platforms. And we see that the majority it's still early days. So the majority is still in either exploring or planning or working on a platform within the municipality, crossing the silos between different departments of the municipality. But an urban data platform brings together not only data from within different silos in the municipality, but also the collaboration with the private sector. And we also see here that roughly 30% have at this moment some sort of urban data platform operational. And then next to that, we also looked at so what type of data then currently is connected, and we call it the data providers. So which silos are currently connected and what type of use cases do we see developed on top of these platforms? And then there are basically three segments that you see that are most connected. That's the mobility and logistics, that's the built environment, and data coming from energy. And let's say the social side of cities are not so much connected yet. But I think this is also to some extent because of the background of the projects. So most of these projects were funded with a focus on mobility, logistics, and energy. And of course, there's a lot of data available in cities, especially sensor data on these in these dimensions. So it's not that strange that these are, let's say, the most connected sectors. We also collected several examples. I just want to quickly show 2 examples of, I heard Dusan talk about the digital twin. So here on the left side, you see the visualization of the digital twin of Rotterdam. And it makes it possible to really visualize data in an urban data platform and then do smart things with it. So what you see here is an analysis of the heat demand of different buildings in the city. And on top of that, some smart tools that calculate, let's say, the energy potentials to improve energy labels of different office buildings. And on the right side, I borrowed an example from the city of Barcelona, who actually, we talked about how can you use data from, let's say, reactive to proactive and even predictive. This is really a nice example of such a predictive model where different types of data are brought together. In this example, to predict contamination, air pollution, and then and really on, let's say, on street level. So really fine-grained insights and a prediction, which then on the one hand can be used to inform citizens. For instance, what are safe places to stay in the city or what are polluted places, but also to really take action. For instance, take specific traffic measures, so to reduce pollution in certain areas of the city. So these are just some 2 examples from how in the end these urban data platforms and, let's say, the applications on top of that also contribute to mitigating climate change and so on.
Got it. Thanks, Marcel. So I think a question probably, I'll start with Dusan, but I'll also come to you. A question that this all raises is the extent to which we can get economies of scale in this market. In other words, can we get one-size-fits-all solutions that cities can deploy almost off the shelf to help them manage energy better, reduce pollution, or are we going to have to reinvent the wheel for every city? What are your thoughts on that, Dusan?
I think that we can help to cities. Of course, every situation is different, so we cannot have one model for all cities without changes, but we can build some general platforms. So actually, I hope that in framework of Digital Europe program, there will be projects really to build like simple models of digital twins of cities. So something that could be used in many cities. Of course, afterwards, every city will have to adapt and to find their model and focus on their main problems. But there is something that could be useful also for other cities. So I think that in both in Digital Europe program and in Horizon Europe mission on cities, there will be some projects to provide platforms in general as examples, models for cities that there will be interested in it. So definitely we see a huge potential, and also this is going to be useful in connection with European data spaces. So we will have larger data spaces that could provide support for cities. And I think in many areas, I can mention buildings. Like tomorrow, the Commission will propose its strategy on renovation wave, because buildings, they are using 40% of all energy, and also they are creating substantial emissions. And there is a huge possibility for energy efficiency, and really also using AI, for example, only with following weather patterns and predicting using AI, dozens of percent of energy could be safe. So there are huge potential.
Yeah, okay. No, so that's striking an optimistic note there. Marcel, from your point of view, how much are cities sharing solutions today? Are you actually seeing cities actually, learning from each other and adopting common solutions, or is it still quite piecemeal?
I think, let's say, these European programs really help for cities to share best practices, also to learn from each other. And actually, this whole network of smart cities, I think that's a great asset that we have as Europe, and there's really much more potential to share best practices and learnings, because to some extent, I have to say that cities still a little bit internally oriented, and there's not so much outside perspective in cities.
Yeah.
So I think there's more potential in Europe, but even on regional level, to have more sharing and a better collaboration among cities, to indeed avoid that every city is basically inventing the same things or running into the same issues.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. We're getting quite a few audience questions in, so I'm just going to turn to those at this point. I'll start with Marcel or Dusan on these, but I might bring in some of the other speakers as appropriate. But one of them is how do we best balance the open sharing of data and the security of that data? Maybe Dusan, you can give us some high-level thoughts from the Commission's perspective, because there is that data strategy there. It is obviously true that open sharing of data can have security implications.
Yeah, like security data for the Commission is extremely important, and we have our GDPR regulation, and that we need to guarantee that data is protected as a primary goal. There is a need for data protection, but at the same time, we need also more data from private companies and also from citizens. So in the coming regulation, we will encourage companies to share data and to come with solutions in order to get data from companies, but also at the same time to guarantee data privacy. Yeah.
Okay, we're actually going to come back to this topic a bit in the third section, actually. So I'll leave this one for now. And come to the next question, which is there's a tendency in the private sector to have a one platform rules them all for data. And how can we overcome this siloed approach? So I guess this is an allusion to the fact that each of the big internet platforms has their own approach, which isn't necessarily interoperable. So maybe I'll start with you on this, Marcel, but I might want to bring in Daniel or Maarten maybe on this topic as well, because it is true that if the private companies are organizing data differently, that makes it difficult for cities to harness, I guess. Marcel?
Yeah, that's true. Of course, as was previously alluded, I think if the cities are making arrangements with external contractors, for instance, providing or offering their smart waste collection, then as part of the contract, the data should be offered by these private companies to the cities. So that basically you build up this urban data platform as a city, and you gain control back over your data, because to some extent currently data often is locked in these siloed solutions, and then it's difficult for cities to let's say bring those data sources together. There is, of course, an issue there on the company side, is that it might, let's say, harm their current business model. So companies really need to rethink their business model, also in a way of if they share their data, what other type of services could they, and what other type of revenues could they generate apart from the data itself.
Let's just get Daniel to comment on that, because I know EIT's been thinking about this from a a city perspective. I mean, this is a problem, the fact that Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, etc., they all do things differently.
No, right now many cities are using data from Google and from Waze. That's they are using for the for all the traffic real-time data. But I think yes, I'm agree with Marcel say that these platforms should be managed and handled by the cities. But I think the cities should have a more long-term perspective in terms of creating something like open innovation areas or sandbox where I think with new companies, especially I think these small companies, startups, they have an idea and they can use and share data in a not regulated place, okay, and an environment. And I think many of the ideas that cities are already just doing for fighting the problems of pollution, like cameras to control the access to cars, are great. But the usage of this information, or the information they are using to third parties, especially for the ones that they want to innovate and to create new services, we don't have many examples running in Europe. Yeah? I think there are privacy concerns, there are governance concerns and issues. But I think that the administration should open this, something like, open innovation platforms where they can share information, maybe in temporary way, don't mean permanent way, but where other parties could use this information in order to provide new services.
Yeah, okay, got it. So get the small companies, innovators involved. There's another question, actually, and this is directly for Dusan, so I'll turn to him on this one, which is there any chance of more information about the funds you mentioned? I guess how they're going to be used, how they're going to be allocated, specifically about the digital twins for cities like Rotterdam. So is the Commission actually directly funding those sort of programs, I guess, and how would that work in practice?
For cities, this is something only like in the preparation, so starting from the next year. And for a moment, I don't think that like digital twin of Rotterdam was supported by EU programs in entirety. I think that it was a city project, but we will have open calls for projects in coming years, and there will be part on digital twins for cities. So really, I would recommend to watch two programs, Digital Europe program and Horizon Europe. And in both programs, there will be specific activities related to cities and using digital technologies. So for a moment, this is still not like fixed exactly how both programs are going to be used, but definitely digital technologies in connection with cities will be there.
Yeah, got it. Dusan, just before we move to the next segment, actually, I just wanted to ask you a follow-up question from your original presentation, which is basically around to what extent has the pandemic affected the Green Deal and the Commission's progress with that? Has it slowed things down, speeded things up? Has it had any impact on the implementation of the Green Deal?
The Green Deal is going ahead, and even though we have a global crisis, climate change hasn't stopped. So still, even though we have lower emissions this year, there are forecasts that globally there will be like decrease by 7% in greenhouse gas emissions. But still, when there is a rebound of economy, it will continue. So still there is global warming, and we need to use this opportunity now to come with the crisis, from the crisis greener. So really to focus on green and digital recovery. And I think that there is a general understanding in Europe that it's a lifetime opportunity, and that the member states also, they agree with the Commission that substantial part of all funds should go for climate mainstreaming and digital technologies.
Okay, so to some extent it's focused minds, I guess. Sharpen the questions.
Yeah, it's higher focus on Green Deal and digital.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Dusan. So, and thank you, Marcel. But you can come back in the third segment as well. Actually, I know Marcel's got some thoughts on this, so I'll bring you back. But I'm going to turn to Maarten now, actually, to lead this discussion, essentially around the engagement between cities and their citizens, and using AI and data to become more responsive to citizens and have a better understanding of their needs and a better conversation, for want of a better word, with citizens. So I know you've been thinking about this in Amsterdam. So just tell us how you're interacting with citizens today.
Yeah. So historically, we've been doing this for, I think, about 10 years by allowing people to contact us, call us, or fill in a web form, whatever. I have an issue. Can you please help me with this? This is, of course, something we thought we can improve it using AI. So now we're using machine learning to automatically route these. So this made the service go faster. But what it also did was introduce a little bias there, because machine learning and AI work well when you have a lot of data about something. And you can imagine you have somebody speaking Dutch correctly, making a complaint about something that's often an issue like garbage. It will go well. But if you have somebody that's not a native speaker and making a text report, for example, and sending it to us, the machine learning might not detect it as well. So there will be a delay going on there. Oh, I have somebody at my door. 1 second.
Marcel, I'm gonna bring you in here actually while Maarten's dealing with that. But to what extent we were talking about how AI can be used to engage citizens? To what extent are cities doing that today? Sorry, Maarten, we'll come back to you in a second. But because I know Amsterdam's done quite a lot of work on this, but is that typical or is that atypical?
Well, what actually was an interesting finding from our study was, on the one hand, that cities say it's really important to involve your citizens, also in the context of urban data platforms and the use cases and so on. But in practice, not that much engagement and involvement is there yet. So
right.
It was actually interesting to know that we all think it's important, but what in practice we don't do it that much. Yeah,
okay. So Maarten, that was probably a citizen at the door asking a question, I guess.
So that's why I ran away. Yeah, I had to help.
No, I was just asking Marcel how many cities are actually doing what you're doing, and he says not that many actually in practice. But let's hear a little bit more about what you're doing.
Yeah, so that's like the first step. So the service we design is for the average person, like the car is for an average person as well. If you're too tall or you're too small, you might not fit in. So that's where I was going with my story. So that's how we're like getting feedback about our public environment: speeding boats, garbage, broken tiles, anything. But what we did there is using the same system and applying a new technology to it. So what we decided now, but this system is, by the way, being developed to be completely open source available. So we will share it with other cities, and it will actually be downloadable and deployable easily with the machine learning routing and everything. Had to run up my stairs. So the next step, what we're doing is, what if you can detect something on the streets before it becomes a nuisance? So we made this object detection kit, which is a whole framework where you can basically mount smartphones to garbage trucks or on bikes or on citizens or whatever. And it will stream images to a server and detect what's on it. So we have like this garbage scanning going around the city, but also detecting like dangerous situations, construction sites, or roadblocks. And we use this information, of course, to, well, better collect garbage. We know what type of materials are on the streets, so we can do whole type of things we couldn't do before. So that's like how AI became a new eye to the city, a new opening. So we can basically see what's happening in the physical world and start using data to where it's effective to clean it up. So that's also something that's open source available. And as I saw in the chat, what makes me really happy to see is last week we launched algorithm register. So that's basically all these projects we're doing. We want to put them in there. And it's like, till the type of data we use for training, we want to be completely transparent, because we know using these algorithms will change society and change systems. So it's really good to be open about it. So that's why we launched that, and we are going to fill it in with much more of the algorithms we use for the city. So that's short what we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Can I just ask you about, I mean, in terms of the actual collecting real-time data on what's going on in the city, I mean, I hate to use the word surveillance, but the idea of actually having this kind of eyes and ears, how comfortable are citizens with that? And how do you get them on board that, you know, the city is kind of, is watching the streets, as it were?
Yeah. Well, basically, we want to be really transparent in what we're doing and why we're doing this. We're not doing this for massive surveillance. We're actually developing this technology in a way that it will run like on the vehicle itself. So currently you have traffic cameras, CCTVs, those are all recording images, those are recording people. But with AI, we can change these cameras into sensors. So they will just be detecting garbage, or, hey, it's busy, instead of, hey, who's here exactly. So just saying we don't want to use computer vision in the, well, public space, that would be, I think, a bad mistake to do, because there's much more than facial recognition and tracking people. I think it can even be used to enhance people, their privacy. So I think it's, yeah, we have to be really open and transparent to how we want to use this technology, what are the possibilities of this technology, and start experimenting in ways how it will work for the citizens. So that's why we're focusing on developing AI for citizens in Amsterdam right now.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of opening that data up and maybe making it available to startups and innovators, etc., are there privacy issues that do you have to somehow anonymize the data, or do you have to do a lot of work to make the data, safe, let's say?
Yes. So as you can imagine, if you have to, well, basically collect 50,000 pictures of a garbage bag, so to be able to detect it, with pictures from the street, there's going to be people on there, but you're not allowed to collect people's faces, just like that. But to blur their faces out, you need their face. So that's where it becomes really tricky. So you need to do some things that are not completely 100% good for privacy to eventually be able to achieve like a system that is completely safe in this case. So that's what we're trying to do, is within regulations, we're looking for ways how we can start creating this technology, make it accessible for companies, different cities, in a way that it is completely easy to use and safe for people, their privacy.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to bring in Marcel at this point, actually, because building on this discussion I'm having with Maarten, this question of citizen trust is obviously very important. In the context of your study, are cities generally trusted in this respect? Do citizens believe that they will get this right?
Yes. Well, there's a mixed picture on trust, because trust is also. Perhaps I have one slide that I can share in this sense.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, share the slide.
So basically, well, this slide shows that we looked at what are, let's say, the key factors that drive the use of these urban data platforms and the use of data. And what are, let's say, the factors that are, let's say, more posing a restriction. And here you see those factors, and trust comes out as indeed the most important factor. But also, this is not only, let's say, towards citizens, but also, let's say, in the collaboration between public and private stakeholders. But if you go back to, let's say, the citizen focus, so trust is important, and therefore you need to be open and transparent, like Maarten just said. Also, you can use these platforms to facilitate citizen actions and their involvement, to create a more involved citizens and basically bidding them back in charge. So, for instance, in Rotterdam, an app was developed where citizens can decide and design on how their neighborhood will look like in terms of the environment and places where children can play and so on. But there are also, let's say, some barrier factors which are important in this sense. I made them red in this figure. So on the one hand, which was previously discussed, is digital literacy of end users. So we need to make sure that the platforms, but also the apps that run on these platforms are accessible also by our citizens who are perhaps not that, let's say, digital sophisticated. And then especially these societal and ethical concerns. So what is happening with my data? That's really important, and therefore I think this repository with algorithms, like Maarten just discussed, is really a good idea to be really open about what is happening with my data. And that also touches upon, of course, this the privacy legislation. So especially the use of private data is a sensitive topic that also cities need to be aware of.
Yeah. Okay, no, thanks, Marcel. Maarten, if I can just come back to you on a kind of related point around how we ensure that algorithms AI is kind of objective and fair and allocates resources equitably. If you're relying on an AI system to decide where the city should devote its attention, how can we ensure that each neighborhood gets a fair crack of the whip, as it were?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because often you see in cities, you see within different boroughs or neighborhoods, you see a different level of maintenance. This is like commonly known, like, oh, this is the area of town where the road will be worse, or the whatever, it will not be well maintained as well. And that's of course because the systems are in place like that. If somebody reports it, it will be fixed. If nobody reports it, will be fixed less. If there's more money, there will be more fixes. So the nice thing about, for example, in Amsterdam, we have pictures we take of the city yearly, like the whole city, like panoramas, like of the city. And using like computer vision, we can, for example, detect like bicycle symbols we have in Amsterdam, and see like the amount of decay they already have. So this is right now we're doing this analysis where we're seeing for each neighborhood how well is it maintained, and not looking at any like well, how many people reporting, just physically look in the world, like to see what is well maintained well and what is not, and can we maybe change how we maintain the city and make it more equal, more balanced.
Yeah. Okay, now I can see that's going to be a work in progress that gets refined over time. Anne, if you're still on the line, I just want to bring you back on this question around privacy, actually, because I think it's particularly important in a health data context. Anne, are you still there? Or I can see the. I think she's coming back off. Yeah, sorry, I probably should have flagged this to you in advance, but I just a point Marcel made about the privacy side of things. I mean, that's a particular issue when it comes to health data and personal health data, and particularly when it comes in terms of sharing that with a municipality, etc. Has Novartis thought about how you maintain privacy and protect health at the same time in this context?
Well, yeah, that's a really difficult question. It is absolutely key to maintain privacy. And in our work on the data collaborative, for example, we use the capabilities of Microsoft, specifically of not anonymizing data, but using new ways to make data not recognizable, like differential, what's it called again? Differential, not privacy. Differential privacy, that's the goal. It's a whole statistical undertaking that you can now use. And it's one example of how you can do that. But obviously, in all of the data we collect, it is based on an informed consent of the person to use that data for all the reasons we stipulate in that informed consent. And we will never go outside of that, because that's really against the way we work. Now, when we combine the data from cities, it's not necessarily our data that we are combining. It's also the data is owned by the health systems on the ground. And then there, it is really up to these new statistical methods to make sure that it becomes usable in an anonymous way. And that's the way we look at it now. But I don't have a golden way of addressing that question.
Yeah, no, okay, no, thanks, Anne. That's interesting context, though. Now, we've got a number of audience questions, which some of them are on this topic and some of them are on other topics. So I'll do it speaker by speaker, as it were. But there's a question here. Real-time cities, digital cities can generate a huge amount of data. Is 5G sufficient to handle all this data? Now, of course, I guess cities won't rely on 5G alone. They'll also rely on fiber. But Is there anybody who wants to address that question around the connectivity and the sheer amount of data being collected? Maybe Marcel's looked at this, have you?
Well, we haven't looked at it specifically, but I guess a huge amount of data might be, let's say, sensor data that's real small data, but that's a lot. But if you're talking about, let's say, unstructured data like photos and videos, then of course you need more and more bandwidth. So I think that really depends on the use case and the type of data, but also whether it's real time or not. Whether you need, let's say, bigger connections or 6G or 7G or in the end.
Actually, let's just bring Daniel in quickly on this. Daniel, if you're still there, because 5G is often talked about in the context of self-driving cars and intelligent transport systems, etc. Is all of this stuff dependent on 5G in some way, or do we need that better connectivity, or have we got what we need today?
I think, I think for some special cases in terms of, for example, autonomous driving, yes, 5G will help because, the latency of the 5G is something that is needed already with that we don't have with the current networks. But I think also many of the governments are really pushing for the introduction of 5G, forgetting that still we don't have, the real-time data that available that we need, because we say that the Internet of Things is here and we will have enormous amount of data shared, but today this is not a reality. Okay, what we can do right now with 4G, what we need to really implement the 5G. I think for special cases, I think it will be needed, but I think we are looking for more long term, because if we take in the case of the autonomous driving, it's something long term. But for most of the cases with the current technologies will be enough for what we are talking today.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you, Daniel. Maarten, I think this next question is for you, actually. So I'll direct it straight at you. Recently, the cities of Helsinki and Amsterdam have worked together to each launch an artificial intelligence register, which I think you alluded to earlier, which they describe as a window to the AI systems that the cities use. The registers are thought to be the first of their kind in the world. To what extent could this be seen as an emerging trend? So is this something that you're seeing other cities doing, or is this a kind of one-off for Amsterdam and Helsinki?
I do know, since we launched it like 2 weeks ago, the register, there's been a lot of interest from all over the world to also do this. I think like whatever you call it, like a register or like a website with information, basically could be the same thing. I think it's really important to be open about how you use these technology, especially because it's new and there might be some things not going correctly. So the first thing you need to be able to be checked is to be able that people can get the right information. So I'm not sure if it's going to be an emerging trend, but I think it's really necessary that it's going to be an emerging trend. And I hope also companies will start doing this. So do not see the algorithms they're using as intellectual property, but actually see it like something that they have to share how they work, so people can actually see what a business is doing. That's of course more tricky because there is a difference. Well, if you want to make money, you don't want to give away all the information about how you're doing it. So I think let's start with cities and government doing it. And especially when there is data about people involved, because that's already really important. There's already a lot of processes going on in government right now that are not algorithms that might also need to be a bit more open. So being open and transparent, that's one of the core beliefs we have in Amsterdam. Yeah.
The questioner describes it as a window to the AI systems that the cities use. Does the register allow people to make suggestions for improvements, or actually even make amendments to the systems themselves? Is that a potential next step?
Yeah, well, also, so anything we develop in-house, we will do open source. So if a developer sees it and he's like, I want to change that, you should add this, they're more than welcome to do a pull request, as we say, like in the open source world. Basically, so make suggestions how it could be changed. And I'm always available if somebody has good ideas. Sometimes they come to my door, as they just did. So it's engagement with citizens is always good, especially when there's input around these technical, difficult systems.
And sorry, just a final thing. I just want to clarify: are you actually working with Helsinki on this? Is this a joint effort, or? Yeah.
Yeah, the algorithm register was a joint effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Right. Sorry, I've got another question here.
Could I ask a question, David, on this point?
Sorry, yeah, if you want to stay on this topic, yeah, we'll come to this question in a moment. Sorry, I've got a list of audience questions. You can probably tell.
Okay, just going back to this registry, is there also a role for accountants in that, in terms of checking the algorithms and seeing whether how they are used in practice? Or is it just a citizen that basically has to control these?
So the first step was to make it open, so people can check us. We did some experimenting with, for example, having accountants or like controllers to see if this algorithm is okay. The issue there is, I think, if you just do this check, like, is this system okay, yes or no, that might feel a bit, or might result in just buying off your responsibilities. So we had this company, they checked the systems, they said it was okay. So the moment it would be wrong, you can say, they didn't check correctly. So that's why I'm a bit hesitant to do that. So I'm thinking more like how the scientific world would do it. So have like systems, have them peer reviewed in some nature, have communities in the city review these systems. I think that would be a much better approach to basically do what in academia would be normal with this type of algorithms. And yeah, so the first step is basically, allowing people to see it, the data, the information. So that's why we started with the register, and we're exploring a lot of ways how we can make it a bit more firm or strict. What do we want, what do we not want, and make it illegal or legal to be used.
So this next question is actually a related topic. I mean, it's quite a long question, so I'll just summarize it. But essentially, it's how do we get citizens involved in the planning from the start? So how we actually get them involved in projects before the projects are rolled out and get their input. And basically ensure that their main concerns are addressed right from the start. We got thoughts on that?
Martin? I do, if I may, David. So definitely,
oh, yeah, go on,
yeah, it was one of the main findings also in our report that the Novartis Foundation led with Microsoft on this from the Broadband Commission. So the fact that you have to involve the ones who will benefit from the solution is a key success factor for a scalable solution. Otherwise, it won't reach the people you want it to reach. It's really essential that it's human-centered, but also user-centered. Otherwise, you also get that that resistance from the whole workforce to use it in the end. So you need, not in the case of citizens only, but you need to always involve the users in the design phase already. Otherwise, it won't get there. And that was the case with digital solutions, but it's even more important with AI-driven solutions.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Daniel, you were trying to get in there. I just wondered to what extent that actually happens today. I mean, do we get citizens involved?
I have one example that I want to show. If I have
go ahead.
Just 2 minutes, I will explain it. I will share my screen. 1 second.
Sure.
Okay. This is, I think it's a good example that we had in Barcelona. Okay, that we have participated in urban mobility, but I think there's a good case of citizen engagement. You know, we have one company that is a startup named Lobelia that is providing, you know, with the data analytics. They take information from the data center from the city, and they create, you know, a map where you can see historic information from the pollution, from all the measuring from CO2 and NOx. And you have real-time data information. It's coming from different algorithms that they have developed. But I think they develop a public data set that is available. And the good thing here is that, you know, the local parent associations, they take this information, they create a website, okay? And they show all the schools in Barcelona how exposure, what is the exposure to pollution, okay? That's very important. They just take this data set, they create this map, you can access, you have here the links to the webpage, and you can just navigate on all the schools in Barcelona, and you can see the exposure, okay? This start creating awareness in the schools, okay? I think this happened in the school of my kids, and the parents will start to create commissions when we try to inform the students and also the parents about what is the problem of pollution, you know? Because many of the citizens don't know anything about CO2 or NX, or where it's coming from, what are the risks that you have, with this kind of exposure. And finally, the City Hall of Barcelona was involved on the redesign of the environments of the schools in Barcelona, where the ones that have highest levels of exposure. Okay, and that comes with a participation model that they have. They have a platform where the citizens can put projects, and part of the budget of the citizens goes to redesign spaces. And finally, this year they will kick off 22 schools. They will complete a redesign, where the participation of the local communities has been very important on this process. Okay. Finally, next year we will take one of our projects of citizen engagement. We just take the school, the kids on the school, and we just help them, and we will try to explain how they can design new mobility services, how we can design new urban spaces, to create also this awareness and to be part of the decision making, or the future decision making. Okay, I think this is a good example, because I think a smart cities concept has failed to get to citizens, and I think in this case, that's, you have one example where the city has been involved and has involved the citizens, but first we need to create awareness. That is very important. Okay, and sometimes with all this challenge that we have, we are so far from the citizens. Okay.
Okay, so thank you for that, Daniel. So we've only got 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to get a little forward-looking segment, actually, from each of the speakers. So just a short, maybe a couple of sentences each, actually. But if we look ahead 5 years from now, to what extent will AI and data analytics have changed urban living? So 5 years is an arbitrary window, but I just want to get a feel for how fast you think this is moving. And the reason I'm doing that is partly because I think amongst lay people, there's not really an understanding of how far artificial intelligence in particular has got and what kind of impact it's already having in the real world. So, Maarten, I know you're living and breathing this stuff every day, so I'm going to start with you. I mean, how much progress do you think we'll see in the 5-year time frame?
Well, I think it's not how much progress there will be, but how much there should be. We should really invest in this and get some strategy and work together good, because if you're not going to be developing this technology for cities, it's just going to be, well, being used for marketing, selling things more efficient, consuming more. I think we need to use this technology to be more efficient, be more sustainable. And as cities, I think this is a really good place to get started, because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of opportunities with AI to solve these issues. So every day I'm working as hard as I can to make sure that we'll be as far as we possibly can be in 5 years in using this technology for the good of citizens, for the good of the planet. So that's, yeah, I don't know where we are in 5 years, but I'm working on making it a good place. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Reasonably bullish. Maybe Anne, if I could come to you next. How much progress are you expecting in the 5-year time frame?
Well, I think it's feasible for cities that really create now and invest in the right aspects of creating the enabling environment to integrate AI in their different services. And let me speak for the health service, because that's what I know. But if cities can do that, really advance on that readiness to deploy AI throughout their systems, they can become real health systems, as I said in the beginning, instead of being disease care systems. So that will be very possible, unless cities don't choose the right investments and forget to level up the skills of the populations, because I saw that was one reason for less take-up of your solution, Marcel, and invest less in the infrastructure and in the governance systems around it. That's all equally important. But on the other side, I think citizens themselves will take much more responsibility for their own health and will be able to manage, to prevent, and also, even if they do get sick in the end, be able to care for themselves much better, thanks to the tools that are brought to the market from now till 5 years from now.
Yes, it's partly an individual empowerment story as much as a top-down story, I guess. On that note, I'll turn to Dusan. What are your thoughts? How much progress will we see in 5 years? I think you're still on mute, Dusan.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm quite optimistic. I think that cities, they are really innovation hubs, and they use technology quite well. And now there is a strong push really to advance in using digital technologies and artificial intelligence. And there are also funds and incentives, and many companies, they are determined to use better digital technologies for cities, for companies, for people. So I think there will be substantial progress. Still, I think that we are not like fully developed in everything. So the progress will be limited in a certain way, but it will be really, I think, start of something that in 10, 15 years can change significantly our lives.
Okay, pushing the time frame out a little bit there, but yeah, okay, thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, I think in the next 5 years, we need to create new kind of innovation. I think the first one will be social innovation. We need to push for that, especially for cities. The second one is the business innovation. I think we could to create new business model that are successful. And this kind of innovation, I include the cities as an important role. And also the last one, not least, but I think it's important, is the technical innovation. That is an important driver for us. But also in all the cases, I think we should be citizen-centric innovation. I think we compare the smart city concept that we have 10 years ago with how it's today, and we see that how fails to engage the citizens and to put the citizen in the middle. We need really to create new solutions that put the citizen in the middle, okay? And I think this is very important. And that's, I think that's what we are doing as urban mobility, and I hope in 5 years we succeed.
Okay, I'm going to thank you, Daniel. I'm going to give the final word to Marcel on this. I mean, you obviously have a real-time view of what's happening right now. So how much progress are you expecting within 5 years?
Well, I think there will be quite a lot of progress, but I do think that cities should really think about this triple helix collaboration. What we also do with the Erasmus Center for Data Analytics, so really bringing together the private sector, the public sector, and linking them to academics and especially students, and linking them to, let's say, the world of startups, because there really new innovation starts, and we really have to speed up, and therefore a collaboration between all the stakeholders is really important.
Got it. Okay, no, thank you. That's a good note to end on. I realize we've overrun slightly, but a big thank you to all our speakers. They've done a great job for us today, covered a lot of ground, a lot of good insights there. As I say, look out for the article that we're going to write about this, which will have some of the key takeaways. That'll be on the Science Business website. And I think we'll look to share both Marcel and Daniel's slides with the participants in the webinar. We'll make them available to you afterwards. But thanks again to the audience for your questions. Had a lot of questions there. And I'm conscious there's a couple we haven't answered. I think we'll try and do that by email. But thank you again to the speakers. That was a very good discussion. We'll look to build on that in future. So thank you all.
Thank you, David. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.